A biblical perspective on life, culture and current events. This is 2020 on Vision.
Hey, some sad news. Overnight, news broke of the death of Dr. James Dobson. He was 89 years old. He was the founder of Focus on the Family and was once called the most influential evangelical leader in the US, and you'd have to say then arguably the world. Well, Brett and Kate Ryan, they lead Focus on the Family in Australia. Brett is joining us now. Hey, Brett, welcome back to 2020.
It's a pleasure.
Hey, Brett, it is an historic day because he was a very significant figure. Founded Focus on the Family back in 1977. How do you reflect on James Dobson and the influence of the organisation that, you're leading an arm of that here in Australia? How do you reflect on his loss?
Yeah, it's an interesting perspective. I mean, we've known a little bit that his health has been compromised the last few weeks, so it sort of doesn't come as a shock. But to know the incredible legacy that he has left behind for his steadfastness, his faithfulness, and being directed by God to stand up for traditional families and the values, and knowing that those things are so important for a healthy society. And knowing personally, but even well before I even started at Focus on the Family, I had read his books and listened to his podcasts, and to help my wife and I, Kate and I, to learn how to parent more effectively, how to improve our marriage, and to work for an organisation that I have the utmost respect for is quite surreal. And to know that his legacy will continue from years and years and years to come because of his faithful servant.
I've got to say, too, that I have been affected by his teaching in those early days. And when my family was young, my wife, she'd pause. It'd be morning tea time, and she'd listen to Focus on the Family. And, and I was running Focus on the Family on the radio back in those days in another life. And, it's a matter of the shaping of a marriage and of a family. But you could say here, Brett, that his parenting advice and his marriage insights actually shaped a whole generation or maybe multiple generations.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, because he left Focus on the Family in 2010. So that's still quite some time ago. But most people associate Focus on the Family with James Dobson. And I think it stands to his credibility as a person who really pioneered the importance of family. And as you so rightly said, those books and resources, like many people remember The Strong-Willed Child or Dare to Discipline. Love Must Be Tough, where a number of he's written over 30 books, I believe, and thousands of interviews that he has done with experts as well as himself. And it's heard in, I think it's 98 countries across the world get to hear the ministry of Focus on the Family now. So he has certainly started something that is going to last from generation to generation because of his faithful servant. Good.
Now, let me just take you into the deep end a little here, because in my reminiscence, you say he stepped down from the leadership at Focus on the Family 2010. And it wasn't some sort of scandal that caused him to stand down. I'm not sure whether you know all the details, but from what I understand, his own son Ryan, who went through a messy divorce, had some effect on the rules that Focus on the Family had for their leadership. Now, I don't know whether I'm reflecting this the right way. I'm just remembering some things that I've heard from the past. How do you reflect on that? Because, they're pretty tight, those rules, for people who are leadership, and you're in that, Focus on the Family.
Well, I've never heard that being brought up before. I do know that his own children went through that difficulty, but he was also a man of incredible integrity. But they realised, the board at the time, that it was coming to an end. His leadership, his style of leadership was coming to an end. And he agreed that he was ready to hand over the reins to Jim Daly. And they did a very smooth transition. But then at the end of the day, he ended up really wanting to stay involved in some capacity. So he ended up starting another ministry called Family Talk. And they also established a institute called the Dr. James Dobson Family Institute. So he continued to do very much the same type of principles that he had built over many, many years at Focus on the Family, and continued. But he was certainly a man who loved some guidelines and was quite strict in his approach to those. But he was also a man that really loved people. And even though he may have been controversial, and you have to admit that he was a controversial figure in some respect, also people admired his for his tenacity. He consulted with presidents, about four presidents that put him on committees and subcommittees on anything to do with the family and anything to do with mental health. His experience and expertise in a variety of areas, but he really was a man that was so in love with God and so in love with wanting the best for families. And he realized that someone needed to do something about it, and he put up his servant towel, put it around his arm, and got to work. And it grew and grew, and now it's on 13 offices around the world, heard in so many countries, and about 18 million people get to hear Focus on the Family across the globe.
You know, very, very strong advocate against abortion rights. He opposed evolution being taught in schools, and he worked against LGBTQ plus rights. He was at the centre of what these days we call the culture war. He was really right on the edge, out in the leading part of the pack there, leading a cultural response to what was coming, this sort of overwhelming LGBT movement. It was a very significant thing that he did stand up and was saying a lot of things that people are only, some people are only just getting a hold of today.
Yes, really, he really was a prophet and a pioneer in that space. And people would say they remember him from what he was against. And, he was against abortion, and he was against same-sex marriage. And we've seen how, pro-abortion, is being controversial, and it divides the world about, a woman's right to choose, but they're forgetting about the child's rights. Then we've seen how same-sex marriage has entered into the world, and it's now being seen as a normal part of behaviour. But that was only just the start of it. And he predicted that once you let in a slippery slope, and it's going to have more and more things that are against what God had designed for the family in the first place. And so he really was a pioneer and a prophet. And some of those things have come to pass. And he's been at the forefront of trying to address those things. And really, I would like to think that he was actually selling what he was for rather than what he was against. And he was for mums and dads to be in love. He was for them to be intentional and love on their kids, and with boundaries and with discipline, and doing it with God's way. And then, as a result, it will benefit society and for generations to come. And that's what he was for. And I'm so proud to be working for an organisation that is holding on to, and we remain resolute in that commitment as well.
Brett, often we'll talk about legacy, the sorts of things that will follow us, at a time like this, when we reflect on, Brett Ryan, when people reflect on Neil Johnson. Well, here we are reflecting on James Dobson and the sort of legacy that he left, because he was a believer in the Bible shaping public policy. He was leading from the front and had a lot of critics because of that. But there's a tremendous legacy there. How do you reflect on what will be left behind from the good work that he did?
Well, standing up for righteousness is not necessarily a good thing, because there's going to be a lot of naysayers. There's going to be people who are against that, and it's hard to stand against the crowd. And I think he was quite countercultural, but he was also a voice where I think there's a lot more people who think that way but are afraid to stand up. And his legacy is about standing up for righteousness and to persevere regardless of the opposition, regardless of people and what they said. And I've been online just recently this morning and read some posts, and they weren't complimentary. They were quite negative, quite destructive about him as a person. But that didn't make him waver in his pursuit of being biblically based, honouring of God, and honouring of the traditional family that God had set in motion, right at the very beginning.
Well, he certainly, from your point of view, from mine, and I'll dare to say the majority of listeners to our conversation today, is a champion of Christian faith and founded an organisation in Focus on the Family that has gone on to flourish and to take beyond his tenure in the top job, has taken that to the world and continued to see those things flourish. A wonderful, wonderful organisation. Hey, just a quick reflection on some of the books. You mentioned Dare to Discipline. There's a copy of that on my bookshelf at home. There's a whole bunch of books. Let me just run through a few, and if you might still sell, books like this through Focus on the Family, and there might be listeners who want to get a hold of one because he was a significant figure. Hide or Seek was another one. What Wives Wish Their Husbands Knew About Women. Love Must Be Tough. Parenting Isn't for Cowards. Children at Risk. There's another one, When God Doesn't Make Sense. Life on the Edge. And another one, Home with a Heart. Those books, and I think that's just part of a longer list, but there's a legacy in those books, isn't there?
Oh, very much so. And in fact, the little bit of the story behind When God Doesn't Make Sense was after he was informed of a supporter of Focus on the Family, and they had just lost their child through cancer. And he was so moved by it, he actually wrote the book, When God Doesn't Make Sense. And we've actually got a pamphlet, a PDF download if people would like to have access, Making Sense When God Doesn't Make Any Sense. And it's a small little booklet when going through a difficult, when you're going through a hard time and you're thinking, why is this happening? This little book just puts some context about how to put things in perspective and how God sees. God doesn't make mistakes. And for whatever reasons why somebody is going through a hard time, this side of eternity, we may never understand. But on the other side, we do. And he was a man, a visionary. He was a man who was disciplined. He was also a man that actually, put his heart and soul into helping more families. And I know it sounds very cliche to help families thrive, but he wanted them to thrive in Christ.
Okay, families and relationships, Brett Ryan, these are at the heart of what you do best. For listeners today, and there'll be some sad listeners because he's made a contribution and helped shape marriages and families. He was 89 years of age. He died overnight, the founder of Focus on the Family, very, very influential evangelical leader. People connecting with you today, Brett, you're happy to hear a call, or people can send you a message?
Definitely.
Yeah.
I just had someone just send me a message, and he says he read all of those books when he was parenting, when he and his wife didn't have a clue. And as a result, his kids turned out pretty good, he says. And I thought that just encapsulates a little message and great encouragement. And we were also the recipients. But I'd love to hear any of your listeners and what they had to say about the influence of Dr. James Dobson and Focus on the Family.
Well, here's how you connect with Brett Ryan, families.org.au. families.org.au, and there might be some social media that you can find too to send a message to Brett. He's survived by his wife Shirley. I think they were married for 60 plus years, and he's got some grandchildren as well. But just to reiterate, Dr. James Dobson died overnight. He was 89 years old. You can connect with Focus on the Family in Australia, the best way to connect. And you know what? You might want to refamiliarise yourself with the sorts of resources that Focus on the Family carries, because if you're looking for help with your marriage, if you're looking for help with raising children, the same sort of wisdom that passed on from Dr. James Dobson through to Jim Daly and through to Brett and Kate Ryan. There's going to be a really good common thread in there of wonderful wisdom on marriage and raising families. It's families.org.au to connect with Brett today. But Brett, I'm sharing your sadness, the loss of Dr. James Dobson. Thank you so much for your bit of tribute to him today on 2020.
You're more than welcome. And if anyone would like to find out a little bit more information about his legacy, and there's a press release, they can go to our website and you can find out a little bit more about Dr. James Dobson and the impact that he had over generations and generations. And so you can go to families.org.au.
Thanks for taking time to listen to this audio on demand from Vision Christian Media. To find out more about us, go to vision.org.au.